Welcome to the Thrive College Podcast. I'm Nina Davidson, Discipleship Director and host of the podcast. Today in the studio, we have Corbin Phillips with us. Give it up for him. Woo-woo. Corbin, we were just chatting. Tell us how long you've been at Bayside.
Yes. So, well, the long story is I've been here since I was 8, right? I grew up here. We came here. We were at a small little Baptist church, and my mom, was a single mom at the time, which is crazy. She took all 3 boys, and we're like, we got to find a church. And a friend of ours had gone to Bayside, and she was like, all right, we're going to give it a try. We fell in love with it, I think, more before she did, which is awesome.
That's awesome.
Which is usually how it goes around with the kids. But and then I've been here volunteering for years, and then ended up coming on staff almost 12 years ago.
Love it. Yeah. And nowadays, you're one of our main worship pastors here at our Granite Bay campus, and you're one of the leads with the amazing phenomenon that is Thrive Worship.
Yes.
I say phenomenon because I feel like it's exploding out into the world, but for so many years, it was something that we at Bayside just got to enjoy and benefit from the songs that you as a team were writing. So tell us, what's your favorite song that Thrive Worship has done?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to sound biased, but there's the song Pour Your Spirit Out that has my testimony in it. And it's one of those songs. We've done a lot of writing in Nashville and been a part of some really cool sessions with people that I would have only dreamt about writing with. But this one in particular was kind of like off the beaten path. We were on a writing retreat in Nashville, but it happened with the team in the Airbnb the night after, or the night after, we were writing and stuff. And so we just kind of were like talking about, life, and it really came from just our stories and eventually again my testimony that made its way, which was never supposed to be in the song, by the way.
Yep.
It was more just like for me to process in the moment. We were kind of like sharing things. And then, of course, Taylor's like my little, he prods. And but he's like, hey, we got to put that on the album, man. I'm like, all right.
That's so good. And for anyone who has not heard the testimony and its tie into the song, give us a little overview.
Yeah. So I battled anxiety, panic attacks for 19 years of my life. So I was from the age of 7 till I was 26, about 7 till I was 26. Yeah. I sometimes hesitate talking about it just because some people don't quite understand what I'm talking about.
Sure.
I never want it to get the wrong impression. I do believe there's a lot of things you can do to prevent mental health, but some people just struggle with it. I was one of those people that struggled with it. And so I went through just a various amount of, whether it's therapy or diets or just trying to figure it out. And all those things did help, but eventually, it's kind of funny. My wife dragged me to a church service. It was not Bayside. It was actually another church.
What? God uses other churches?
Exactly.
What?
It dragged me to a service that the pastor was actually talking on anxiety. And so he talked through the whole thing. And I was kind of like sitting there like, I've heard all this. It's like, this is not news to me. It's not really helpful. I was almost frustrated that I was there. And then the weirdest thing happened. He goes, all right, I'm going to pray. And some of you are going to get healed tonight, and some of you won't. Just like plain as day.
Wow.
Like, just really simple. And he starts praying, and I've never felt anything like this, but it literally, and not since either, but I felt like somebody was pushing on my chest.
Wow.
It was like the strangest feeling. And as soon as he finished the prayer, I like fell into my seat and just cried for like 30 minutes. And
oh my God.
It was weird. Like I knew in that moment, like something had shifted. I went and talked to the pastor afterwards, and he goes, man, even just talking to you, I can tell something shifted here. And so from that point on, that was a little over 6 years ago.
Wow.
I've been panic attack free. And
that's amazing.
Just enjoying the beauty of God's grace on that.
Wow, that is so insane. I feel like talk to the person who's listening, who's just right in the middle of it and they can't even fathom. I know we haven't even introduced everyone yet, but this is just already getting so good.
I love it.
Talk to the person listening who's saying, I'm in the midst of my massive battle with anxiety. And what do I do while I'm in the middle of it, hoping for that healing that you've received? Yeah,
I mean, it's funny. I just had a conversation with someone about this that's going through it right now. And reality is you kind of have to be okay with the fact that if God's plan is for you to not be healed at this moment, there's a reason. That was one of the things that was told to me over time and time again was like, look, whether you're healed or you're not, it's a part of your testimony. So number one, I would say, remember that it's for a purpose, that you're struggling through this, you're going through something that feels insurmountable. And that actually may feel that way because I've been in that situation where you just want to run into your room and hide and not come out. But the reality is God's using your story. And so I would say, number one, keep your chin up, go out there and just look for the beauty in that situation.
Wow. That's so good. And prayers for you listening. If you're majorly battling anxiety or depression, just know you're not alone. There are so many people that we know that are in the thick of this battle. So don't lose hope.
I think I'd say too to that, just going like find somebody you trust.
Yeah.
And have some honest conversations with them. Yeah. Let somebody be there. You know, you can't do this alone. That was the thing I told the person that called me the other day. Is like, look, like this is the worst thing ever if you do it by yourself.
Right.
So like, please call me whenever you need.
Wow. That's amazing. Okay, well, guys, I just major fumbled the ball. I didn't even introduce our amazing friends in here. We're just like knee deep into the conversation. Here, just dive right in, which is actually what we love on the podcast. But we do want to introduce our amazing students, and actually, we have a staff member joining us this round. But Julian, go ahead and kick it off by introducing yourself.
So my name is Julian, and I'm a first year here at Thrive. I intern in the production branch, and hopefully one day. My goal is to work as a production manager for a church anywhere. So, yeah.
Love it.
Love it. Madeline?
I'm Madeline. I'm a staff lead at Thrive College, and my dream is probably become a worship leader and
Let's
do
go.
something like, yeah.
My people.
Yes.
Love it. And you're interning at the Adventure Campus?
Yes. At Adventure.
Perfect. Awesome. Love it. So obviously there, even though you shared your battle with anxiety, which is kind of a part of the story, I think a lot of people would be like, yeah, I want to live the dream. I don't want to live the journey.
Right, yeah.
So I'm glad we talked about that first. But in reality, you're living a amazing chapter of your life that I think a lot of people would probably say, I have some questions about what it looks like to be there. So before we dive into these amazing questions, we've got some more history sharing, rapid fire questions just to get to know you a little bit better. Tell us where you were born, where you're living now, and tell us about your kids and your wife, because they're amazing and part of the story.
They're the best part of the story.
I love it. And then tell us one thing about your youth you wish more people knew. So where you were born, where you live now, tell us about your family, and one thing about your youth you wish more people knew.
Yeah, great. So I live in Roseville, California, but I was born in Sacramento, California. So Sacktown proud.
Moved super far.
Yeah, well, I knew from the moment of birth I was going to be a Kings fan. So
There you go. There you go.
Yeah, I live in
loyal through it all.
Exactly. All since 2002, I've been faithful. No, so long before that. I live in Roseville. Got a house over there, and my family is really the star of this show here. So my wife, Lori, just absolutely incredible human being, just a gem of a human being. I've never met anyone like her. I definitely won the lottery as far as marriage goes because she's way out of my league. I don't think we're playing the same sport. It's a whole other thing. What's kind of funny about that is she's 5 years older than me. So
nice.
when we first we're talking about dating. In fact, my mom suggested that I date her, which mom's always
good
the
job,
best.
Mom.
But I was like, no way, she's older than me. Like I can't do it. But thank God I listened because now we've been married for almost 6 years, which is incredible.
That's so amazing.
We've got 3 girls, beautiful girls. I have a 3-year-old that just turned 3. Her name's Elle, which is absolute ball of joy. Elle actually, we named her Ellery, and it actually means joy.
I love that. Ellery?
Absolutely, yeah.
I've never heard that before.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Absolutely lived up to her name. Tons of joy. Also, sometimes the stinkiest kid. But and then 6 months ago, almost 7 months ago now, we had twins. So I've got 7-month-old twins at home with a 3-year-old, and in the midst of that, we decided to go on tour. So
way to go! Yeah. And so Thrive Worship, you guys have actually been out for Winter Jam.
Yes.
Plus, what's that like to be out on the road?
It's been awesome. So I used to tour back when my early 20s, like 22, 23, and I did it quite a bit, probably like 50, 60 shows a year, which is about being out like once every week.
Wow.
Like for a couple days. So I haven't done that in a while. And so
when you had 7-month twins, you thought, this is the perfect time.
Perfect time to get back out there.
Lori's like, what?
Oh my gosh. So it's been incredible though. So Winter Jam, for those who don't know, it's an arena tour that goes all across the country. There's a bunch of bands that are on it. So like We the Kingdom is with us, Ann Wilson is with us, Jeremy Camp, a couple others too as well. I would say even aside from the tour, just getting to know those guys, like incredible human beings, like they are the real deal. We've had a lot of fun just like backstage, like hanging out, playing ping pong, and but the tour itself has been it is awesome. The tour itself's been incredible. We've just been able to share what's happening at Bayside out on the road, which is like really cool. One of the comments that we got from one of the We the Kingdom guys was like, man, you can tell your church is the real deal. That's like refreshing to see. So that was like really encouraging to hear. Like,
Sure.
you know, we're the only worship band on the tour. Everyone else is kind of more like CCM pop artists out there.
Yeah.
And so we're the one worship band that's kind of a part of the bill.
What a privilege.
It's really fun. So we actually, for one of the weeks, they do a church service for just the tour. So we got to lead worship.
Wow.
That
Oh
was
my
super
gosh.
fun.
Like for everyone doing the tour, like,
So like,
on the
like
road.
all the artists and the crew and all that.
Wow.
Yeah, so we did like a little church service for them, which was super fun.
Oh my gosh. Did you preach? Who preached?
I did not preach.
Okay, no. I don't know. You were preaching
One
during
day
the first bit.
I want to give a sermon. It'll probably go terrible. One day I'm gonna
No.
try.
Oh my gosh. Sign me up.
There's a guy named Zane Black. That's he's the actual tour pastor. He's does a message in the show as
Gotcha.
well. But he's been given the messages for the church, which is
I
great.
love that.
Yeah,
So fun. Okay, well, Thrive College Podcast, we always love to pass the mic to the rising generation of Christian leaders. And so today in the studio, that's Julian and Madeline. So Julian, kick it off with your first question for Corbin.
So I thought of this question going back to my childhood. I grew up in the church, and a lot of things like a worship environment was nothing like foreign for me. But I feel like over time it kind of just becomes a second nature, and you don't really truly get the concept of it.
Yep.
And I feel like even to this day, when I'm in like a regular weekend, I'll be experiencing like a moment of worship, and sometimes I'll have doubts where it's like, am I truly in this? Like, am I feeling authentic worship, or am I just raising my hands because the crowd is raising their hands? Am I singing the song because I like how it sounds? So I guess my question is, like, how can I be more confident in feeling more authentic with how I worship?
Yeah.
So yeah,
That's such a good question. I feel like if everyone was just honest with themselves, they've probably all been there. I've definitely been there. I've been there on stage. You know?
yeah.
And so I think a couple things come to mind as you're just kind of talking through that question is, number one, I think of the fact that, like, in the Bible, it tells us that we're supposed to live a childlike faith.
Right.
Like, when I was actually just thinking about this morning, I think maybe just with my kids, but it's so easy for us, even outside of worship sets, outside of services, church services altogether, to find ourselves in that rut.
Yeah.
And to get almost numb to, like, the amazing things that God has for us, you know, like the amazing things that he does for us. Even just the fact that we wake up with mercy every morning, like we grow numb to that.
Yeah, exactly.
But living a childlike faith, like my daughter is so excited about every little like nuance of the day, you know, like there's the littlest thing will just light her up. And I think for me, I've had to challenge myself in seasons where I feel like I'm becoming numb, to get back to the basics, like really start to even like thank God for the little things. Like, man, I woke up this morning.
Yeah.
I do have mercy this morning. Man, I still have hair on my head. That's awesome. Like I'm getting older and I still
Can't
have
take it
full
for
head of hair.
granted.
Like the little things, like you find yourself just in awe of the fact. And then you start to think about the big things, and you think about like, oh, and not only does Christ love me and he died for me, he's coming back, and that's going to be crazy. And like you get to the level of going, man, like I think that's what it looks like to live a childlike faith.
Okay.
And then it's also the level, we have that song Coming Back, which I didn't write, so I can talk about. And I think the nature and the thought behind that song is really the idea of coming back to your first love, which is something from Revelation as well. And you kind of look at why God says that, and it's because we lose sight of who he is and the things that he's done, and just the amazing wonder that he is. And so coming back to our first love and letting go of the things of the world, I think that's a daily practice we have to find ourselves in.
Yeah.
That's so good. Cool. Talk to me from the perspective of someone on stage, kind of having, you mentioned, which I thought was so interesting. Yeah. You're like, I'm here, I'm leading worship. You know, we have 5, maybe, I don't even know, 6 services at our Granite Bay campus. What's it like to go out there and put yourself in a mindset of worship when you have those self-doubts about, like, I'm just not even feeling worship right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it's been a good, like, kind of like practice in this last season, being just exhausted from 3 kids. Right. And then, you know, you find yourself like, like here we have at Granite Bay, we have 5 services on a weekend. And we do try as like very, very hard, actually, is one of the things I really appreciate about our team. We always say the phrase that it's our last service if we're on Sunday night, but it's their first, right? And we try to take that mentality every service we go into. And sometimes you'll even see within the worship set, we change things up a little bit, maybe say something different, add a tag to a song. But I think here's what I'll say is because so many things have to be in order when you're on a weekend, right? Because there's a service order, there's like a service that's coming after this one, so you have to make sure we can get the parking lot open. There's a lot of things to think about, who's playing the right chords, who's on bass, all that kind of stuff. So I think one of the ways for me that I've tried to get into a worship mindset is starting off stage. Doing the homework before. Right. I'm not always perfect at this, but one thing I try to do every week is get a time where I just open my Bible, start, like jotting stuff down in my journal. Sometimes a song will come. Sometimes it will just be for me. But it's kind of like I fill myself up there, and then I get into the service and it starts to overflow. Even just going through like scripture. You're like, I think I shared something this past week and I can't remember what it is right now, but I remember in the moment I wasn't going to say it, but the scripture came to mind, and it was like, okay, that only was able to happen because I spent the time doing the homework before.
Wow, that's so good. Yeah. I feel like for worship leaders and for just people like myself who come and we sit in services, it's so powerful to start church before you get to quote unquote church.
Yes.
Church starts in the car. Church, for me as a mom, church starts in the way I'm treating my kids before I get in the car. And when I finally get to sit down, it starts there of talking to God and just saying, I'm open to praise you today. I'm open to receive from you today. And so I think that's a good word for all of us.
Absolutely.
So good. Great first question, Julian.
Love it.
Miss Madeline.
My question is, I've begun to write my own songs.
Yeah, it's awesome.
And so I'm curious how you bring God into the creative process when writing worship songs.
Well, that's a great question. I think it starts with recognizing that he's the ultimate creator, right? Yeah. So anything we do is just it's like a mirror image of what God has intended, right? Like he is art, he is creation. And so I think it starts there, but then that's really on the macro level. You get down to the micro level. And I'm assuming you're asking for writing worship songs? Yeah. So I think there's a couple things that we try to do just to stay grounded to even just best practices we think about. And the first of which is it's a story is always a really good communication tool. Jesus taught in parables. They were stories. I think because naturally we're built. Someone else, I just read something or saw it on a podcast. Someone was talking about our very fiber is designed for story. We literally need story to survive. And so I think it starts with going what is it that God's doing in my story that I can share? So Pour Spirit Out's a great example. We got to share that story. Yes. Here's another one. I think, and this is not something you would see real tangibly in the song, but I know it. So there's a song called Always So Good that's on the last album as well. And the bridge of that, it goes, how many promises have you kept? How many times have you come through? Right. Not done yet, or I know you're not done yet, so I will worship you. And then it says, how many Jordans have I crossed? How many giants have you slain? So that Jordans have I crossed. The background of that is, it comes from Joshua 4. The Israelites go across the Jordan River. And Joshua goes, actually on your way, grab 12 stones, and they set them up on the other side as an altar, right? And the reason why he says that is he goes, I want the generation after generation after generation to see this and remember that God was faithful to the Israelites. Well, for me personally, I feel like that really resonated with me. Now, I'm not trying to go replacement theology here at all, but but what I will say is that I think the nature of God is to show us his faithfulness. And so I think one thing that came to mind, and this is what kind of spurred on some of that thought in the bridge, was I had this is a weird thing for me a little bit, but there was a girl that prophesied over me at a retreat one time. Her name's Mia Fields, and she was doing kind of a spontaneous prophecy for the event we were at. And she was going through and naming all this stuff, and I was kind of weirded out, truthfully. Although one of them was to my wife, saying she was going to find her husband that year, which was me, which is
nice. Crazy. Prophecy fulfilled.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a fruitful prophecy.
She kind of finished the segment. I was like, oh, thank God.
she didn't get me.
Yeah, exactly. And she goes, oh, I have one more. And she looks at me. I was like, oh. And so she goes, oh, perfect. Because I kind of did one of these, turned my head.
Yeah.
So you can't be looking at me.
She's like, gotcha.
And she goes, perfect. And now I know it's for you. And she goes, okay. Number one, she had mentioned just going, there's times that the Spirit has manifested in weird ways. That's maybe just a weird person. And you have to recognize that like the Spirit does want to move, and very specifically, she says, if you allow the Spirit to, it will help you to write songs that you've always wanted to write, go places you've always wanted to go, and sing the songs you've always wanted to sing.
Wow.
Which was amazing. And I think about that because even as, what we're doing with Thrive, I find myself doubting sometimes. Right. Like even like when things are going great and you can be in the midst of God's blessing and you still find yourself in those doubting moments.
Right.
Yeah.
I feel like that bridge for me was reminding myself of the truth that God had spoken to me and kind of the faithfulness that he is bringing. And I say that, and it actually kind of humbles me because it's not for me. It's not for me that I'm going to get to write the songs I've always wanted to write. Like it's because there's a message that I'm carrying that God wants to share. And so I think that's been really cool. And it's a long way to answer your question, but I think going back to like what has God done in my story and how can I get that out on paper and lyric and melody. So
Wow.
So good.
So I kind of heard two veins. One was really dwelling and reflecting on what God has done in your story and letting that be the inspiration for what he wants to say or sing through you in this case to benefit others. And then also just with what you shared about Joshua, it's also like immersing yourself in his story and figuring out how to say that in a creative way that will capture the hearts and the minds of the people alive today. But both of it, because story is in the fiber of our being, it's immersing yourself in story and figuring out how to share that. So good, so helpful. I definitely have never thought about songwriting through those veins. And this is a true story. I took this is like how non-musical Dina is. You know my sister Rach.
Yes.
She's like a prodigy, like she's an amazing musician. She's a worship pastor. We were taking a piano class together and we were given the task of writing a song. And so Rachel, who's like full emo at this time, she like literally pours her soul out onto a page. And so she goes first in giving her song to our music instructor. And so then I go, oh my gosh. And so then I go down and I literally go, this is a song written in rhyme, written especially to fit the time. Let us all sing. And I do like this stupid singing thing. And Rachel just is like crumbling with the weight of like the vulnerability that she just shared. So I just want to say like, hey, there are some that have this and some that maybe you just like don't have this. But if you have this, Madeline, if you have this, then I just encourage you, don't doubt the gift because it's so easy to take what you're producing, what you're writing in your journal and to compare it to what's being published. But what you're writing in your journal is the draft of something that maybe God one day wants to publish, wants to push out into the world. So don't get discouraged. If you have the gift, just keep at it, keep honing it. And I'm sure, Corbin, you would look back at your, 15-year-old songs you were writing and saying, thank God that I kept working at it because, were they? See, he's more the prodigy type. Well, but anyone who's not perfect, you keep working at
terrible.
it. So, well, anything else that you guys want to ask before we ask our last question?
I do have a question, but I'm still trying to figure out how to like piece it all together.
Sure.
I guess it's like, are there any red flags from a production or worship standpoint that would get into someone's head to where they feel like what they're doing is from them and it's like, I'm the best in this position?
Yeah.
And if so, is there anything that we can do that could just prevent that mindset and like stay on the right track and know what we're doing this for?
It's a fantastic question, and I think that it's a battle for anybody who's in any form of stage leadership, right? I think you can really it's even beyond stage. Like it's so easy to put our identity in what we're good at. But the reality is, I think there's a couple things that I would do, and I try to do. Number one is it's the thought of in Romans 12 renewing your mind every day, right? And then it's also going like, hey, the role that I play, it's a much smaller part than the bigger picture.
Right.
The role that I play on a weekend right now, right? I lead worship. It's a very small role in the grand scheme of eternity. And I think it's good to remember that and give yourself a healthy perspective and kind of like sober-minded view of where you stand in God's economy. And so like reality is, I think, yes, like anytime you find yourself, desiring the applause, if you're asking the question, how did I do rather than how were they ministered to. I think those are things that are kind of telltale signs that you're doing it for the wrong thing. And I think the reality is everyone is subject to it a little bit. Like people are people, and there's going to be that human flesh side that wants the approval of man.
Yeah.
And it's just finding good like checks and balances to make sure that you're staying above all that. So
cool.
It's a great question.
Love it. Okay. Last question that we always ask on the podcast, Corbin. You ready for it?
I am.
Okay. This podcast, maybe. We'll see. This podcast exists for young leaders. We want them to become everything that God wants them to be. Yeah. We want them to do everything that God has called them to do. So in light of all of that, what is the one thing that you would say to a young Christian leader?
Man, what a question. Okay, so there's a book called, and I'll probably botch the title here. I think it's called Tale of Three Kings.
That is it.
And I love that book. It's a really easy read. So number one, I would say get the book and go read it because it's really good. But I'll boil down just the piece that I think that I would share, which is we all think that we're David in the story of Saul, David, and Absalom, right? David is king. He's man after God's own heart. Like he's got all this like musical talent. He like killed a bear. Like dude is just like crazy, right? Like we all think we're David. We want to relate to that persona because it's awesome, right? Yeah. Even though he was completely flawed and had all these issues and probably the like most mentally screwed up out of all of them. But we think we're David when reality is we're Saul. And David would not be David unless Saul had beaten the Saul out of him.
Yeah.
And sometimes God takes us through trying seasons. And sometimes we're like, why am I not getting more stage time? Why am I not getting like promoted? Why am I not getting the attention why are people not noticing like this great skill that I'm bringing? Like God has given me all these gifts. Sometimes that's not a bad thing. You're recognizing that God has given you good stuff, but then you start to question, oh man, like this person got that, this person got that blessing. Why am I not getting that? David had to get the Saul beaten out of him before he was king. And I think what I would tell to young leaders is, and there's some of this that's true, but likely you're not being bullied. It's not church hurt. You just need to go through a season of pruning and craft, or to hone in your craft and to let God like chisel away the things that are going to be like problematic for you as you get into more and more leadership. Because the reality is the more and more responsibility you get, the harder it is. And I think that the more you have to be ready for the battle. And so kind of embrace that prep work that God like designs for you to go through. So get that book and follow its instructions.
So good. And if you're listening and you're thinking, man, I'm in that season where it just feels like I'm not getting platformed, I'm not getting even recognized, or I feel completely unseen, even though that God has given me this calling and this gifting, then I really hope you let what Corbin said sink in and just say, maybe this season is not about me doing something for God. It's about God doing something in me so that he can ready me to do what he is calling me to do. So very wise word. Thank you so much, Corbin, for being on the Thrive College podcast. Thank you for joining us today on the Thrive College podcast. We hope that today's episode has empowered you to navigate the challenges and the opportunities of your future in your faith. If you really enjoyed our conversation today and appreciated what we had to offer, we would love for you to write a 5-star written review and share it with your friends. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week.